I stood on the cracked front porch, the wood groaning under my sneakers as the sky split open above me. Rain blurred the crooked numbers of the address I once called home. The door opened just wide enough for a hand to slip through, my mother's hand, still wearing her wedding ring. No eye contact, no words, just a plain white envelope pressed into the storm. Then the door shut with a sharp final click. I stared at the envelope, rain soaking through the thin paper, before tearing it open with fingers that refused to stop, trembling. Inside, a crumpled 20, 2 10s, a 5, and a one-way bus ticket, out of state. No note, no explanation. Behind the door, I could hear the muffled clink of silverware, the soft hum of dinner conversation. Life went on, without me. I lifted my backpack, half empty, packed in a rush, and stepped off the porch. No one came after me. No porch light flicked on behind me. No voice called out into the rain. The bus stop was 3 miles down the wall. Road. I started walking. Each step away from that house felt heavier, like the rain had seeped into my bones. At 17, I carried nothing but a soaked backpack, a thin jacket, and a growing hole inside my chest where family used to live. Didn't cry. Not then. The cold had already frozen that part of me solid. Maybe that's what they wanted. Maybe they thought I'd just disappear, washed away by the rain and distance, small enough to forget. But as I walked into the storm, clutching that soggy ticket, a thought pressed itself into my mind. Quiet, but unshakable. One day, they'll wish they hadn't closed that door. And when that day came, it wouldn't be loud. It would be quiet, final, undeniable. Just like the sound of that door locking behind me. 3 weeks after the night I left, curiosity pulled me to an old public library where the computers were free to use. I hadn't spoken to anyone from home. I didn't expect anything. Maybe part of me just wanted proof that I'd imagined it all. The family photo popped up on my cousin's social media page, a birthday party for my father. Streamers, cake, faces full of smiles. Everyone was there, everyone, except me. At first, I thought maybe I had been cropped out by accident. But as I looked closer, the truth settled heavy in my stomach. They hadn't just erased me from the photo. They had rearranged the group, pulled chairs together to close the gap where I would have been. No trace of me remained. In the caption below, my cousin had written, "So blessed to have the whole family together." Whole. That word stayed with me longer than I care to admit. I stared at the screen until the library lights flickered for closing time. There was no anger then, not even sadness, just a hollow realization. To them, I wasn't lost. I wasn't missed. I had been corrected. Like a mistake edited out of a photograph. Outside, the night air smelled like wet concrete and old leaves. I shoved my hands deep into my jacket pockets, the thin fabric barely holding off the November chill. If erasing me made their world cleaner, easier, lighter, then so be it. I didn't want to be part of anything that required forgetting who I was to stay intact. Somewhere, deep beneath the numbness, a different kind of fire began to flicker. Small, weak, but stubborn. They might have edited me out of their story. But I wasn't finished writing mine. It was a Wednesday afternoon when the truth found me. I was stacking boxes in the stockroom of a thrift shop, trying to earn enough for the next week's rent, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from Nate, a kid from my old neighborhood. Someone I hadn't thought about in months. "Hey man, heard your folks said you moved on, that they finally handled their situation. Cold, dude." Real cold. I stared at the words for a long moment, my fingers stiff against the cardboard. Situation. That's what I had become. Not a son, not even a problem. Just a situation to be handled. In a way, it explained everything. The rushed envelope, the door shutting without a word, the empty space where my picture used to be. It wasn't a moment of anger or confusion that had pushed me out. It was a plan. A decision made long before the rain ever soaked through my sneakers. The next time I passed a mirror, I barely recognized myself. Not because I looked older, thinner, harder, though all of that was true, but because there was no softness left in my face. I had grown up believing that family might bend, might bruise, but never break completely. That even if words were sharp or tempers hot, there was an invisible line that couldn't be crossed. I was wrong. There are lines. And sometimes people don't just cross them. They draw them in ink, and they leave you standing on the wrong side, wondering how you ever thought you belonged. That night, as I lay on a secondhand mattress in a room that smelled faintly of mildew and old paint, a single thought kept me awake. If they could cut me out that easily, then I could build something that didn't need them at all, and this time, no one would be able to erase me. The pieces started falling into place one night, when I overheard two regulars at the thrift shop talking by the counter. Small-town gossip spreads faster than smoke, and if you listen long enough, you hear things you're not supposed to. They were talking about my family, about how my father had put the house up as collateral for a loan, a hefty one, to help. My older brother started a business, how they were betting everything on him, how trimming excess baggage had made the approval easier. Excess baggage. I folded a stack of faded jeans mechanically, but the words burned hotter than the iron used. To press them. In their eyes, my existence had been a liability, a stain on the perfect narrative they needed to sell to banks and investors. I wasn't part of the plan. I was the thing that made the story messy. When the loan papers had been drawn, there had been a careful omission. My name, my claim, my future. Erased not just from a photograph, but from any legal trail that could tie me to them. In their new version of events, they had two sons, one polished, promising, deserving of investment, and one gone. I wondered briefly if they told themselves it was necessary, if they softened the betrayal by calling it a hard choice made for the good of the family. I wondered if they ever sat around that kitchen table and said my name out, loud, felt even a twinge of guilt. But deep down, I knew the answer. They hadn't closed that door because they had to. They closed it because it was easier. The realization didn't come like a slap or a scream. It settled in slowly, like dust on forgotten shelves, a quiet, undeniable truth. If I had been disposable once, I could be dangerous now. Not through revenge, not through rage, through becoming someone they couldn't edit out, no matter how hard they tried. I didn't map out a grand plan that night, lying on a mattress that sagged in the middle. There were no promises of greatness, no secret blueprints to success. There was only a stubborn refusal to be the mistake they thought they'd erased. First job I found was hauling scrap metal at a junkyard outside of town. 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, for barely more than minimum wage. The work was brutal. My hands blistered and bled before the first weekend ended. My back ached so badly that sometimes I had to roll out of bed onto the floor just to stand upright. But every bruise, every cut felt earned. This pain belonged to me, not to them. At night, after my shift ended, I cleaned up as best I could, at a gas station bathroom, then parked my old hatchback behind a 24-hour diner and slept curled up in the back seat. Winter crept into the cracked windows and stiffened my joints, but the cold sharpened my focus. Every hour I survived was another. They hadn't taken from me. 2 months in, I used my meager savings to enroll in evening classes at the local community college. Business fundamentals, real estate basics. I sat in the back row, smelling faintly of metal and oil, absorbing everything I could. The other students had laptops and crisp notebooks. I had a battered spiral-bound pad and a pen stolen from the gas station counter. It didn't matter. I wasn't there to impress anyone. I was there to learn how the world worked. The real world, not the fairy tale my family sold themselves. The first property I ever bought wasn't much. A condemned duplex so riddled with mold and rot that the bank practically begged me to take it. I spent weekends and every spare evening tearing out drywall, scrubbing floors, teaching myself plumbing from YouTube videos. I lost 15 pounds that winter, swinging hammers in the freezing dark, but when I finally sold it, cleaned up, painted, breathing new life, I made enough to pay off my debts and stash a small emergency fund. It wasn't glamorous. I wasn't an overnight success. I didn't post smiling selfies or announce my triumphs online. Every dollar came with scraped knuckles, sleepless nights, and doubts that gnawed at me like rats in the walls. Sometimes alone in the stripped-down houses I gutted and rebuilt, I would hear echoes, a laugh that sounded like my brother's, a door slam like the one that closed on me. I learned not to flinch, not to look back. Each property led to the next. Each scar toughened my skin. I didn't dream of showing off or proving them wrong anymore. Somewhere along the way, the work became its own reward. The slow transformation of ruin into shelter, decay into value. It mirrored something quieter, something deeper happening inside me. I was not the boy they had cast out. I was becoming a man they could never claim. Built not by their approval, but by everything they tried to deny me. By the time word reached me that their house, my childhood home, had slipped into foreclosure, I didn't feel triumph. I didn't even feel anger, just a cold, clear certainty. I was ready, and when the auction date was announced, I made sure my offer was the first on the table. No fanfare, no announcement, just a set of keys waiting in a plain envelope. Just like the one they once handed me in the rain, except this time the door would open for me. Word spread fast in small towns. By the time the foreclosure signs went up, my family had already crafted their story. They weren't losing the house, they insisted. They were moving on to better things. They had plans. They chose to leave. Neighbors gathered one last time on the cracked driveway for a farewell barbecue. Balloons bobbed in the cold breeze. Paper plates sagged under the weight of store-bought potato salad and overcooked burgers. Smiles stretched too wide, voices pitched too high. It was a performance, and everyone, even the guests, knew, and my mother wore a floral dress that billowed around her thin frame, laughing just a little too loudly at every joke. My father, who used to lecture me about pride and legacy, stood stiffly by the garage, clutching a beer he barely sipped. My brother moved through the crowd like a politician, shaking hands, patting backs, making promises he couldn't possibly keep. They posed for pictures under the front porch light, just like the family photos we used to take before birthday cakes and Sunday dinners. Only this time there was no casual joy, no real warmth. Just brittle smiles and stiff shoulders, as if holding the pieces together by sheer will. I watched from a distance, parked in a side street where no one would notice. I wasn't ready to step into the light yet. Not tonight. Tonight was theirs, their final show in a crumbling theater. I didn't feel anger watching them. I didn't even feel pity. Just a quiet, detached sort of recognition. They needed the story. They needed to believe they were choosing this ending. Because facing the truth, that they had gambled and lost, that they had cut away part of themselves, only to fail anyway, would have been too much to bear. Better to pretend. Better to celebrate an exit they didn't control. I let them have it. Their last illusion. Tomorrow would belong to me. The auction paperwork was finalized at 9 that morning. By noon, I had the keys. I didn't rush. I didn't announce. I simply parked my truck 2 blocks away, tucked the envelope into my jacket, and waited. The farewell barbecue was winding down, but a few stubborn clusters of guests still lingered in the yard, laughing too loudly, pretending the November wind wasn't cutting through their thin jackets. My brother leaned against the porch railing, scrolling through his phone. My father smoked a cigarette near the mailbox, a habit he had sworn he'd quit years ago. My mother stood at the edge of the crowd, smiling faintly at nothing in particular, her hands wringing the hem of her sleeve. I stepped out of the truck, the gravel crunching under my boots. No one noticed at first. Why would they? I was just a figure moving through the background of their final act. It wasn't until I reached the bottom of the driveway that my father looked up. His cigarette froze halfway to his lips. My brother's. Phone slipped slightly in his hand. My mother's face paled, her smile faltering into something uncertain and thin. I didn't speak. I didn't wave. I simply walked up the front steps, the wood groaning under my weight, the same porch where they had once pressed an envelope into my hand and shut me out without a word. I reached into my jacket, pulled out the new set of keys, and fitted one into the front door lock. It turned with a soft, final click. The conversation behind me died mid-sentence. Plastic cups crinkled in frozen hands. The wind picked up, scattering paper napkins across the brown lawn. I pushed the door open slowly, the hinges squealing in protest. Then I stepped inside, my home now, and closed the door behind me without looking back. No speeches. No confrontations. Just the undeniable sound of belonging. A sound no one could argue with, no matter how many lies they had told themselves. Outside, I could almost hear them breathing, stunned and wordless, trapped in the story they had written, a story that no longer belonged to them. For the first time in years, I felt the floor solid beneath my feet. Not as a guest, not as a mistake, as the owner. Inside, the house smelled different. Stale air, old wood, the faint ghost of family dinners that had ended long before I was pushed out. I stood in the front hallway, letting the silence stretch. Through the window, I could see them slowly gathering, hesitant at first, then drawn by something they didn't yet understand, or maybe feared they already did. The front door swung open before I touched it. My brother stood there, his mouth slightly open like he was about to speak, but no words came. Behind him, my mother clutched her hands to her chest, her eyes wide, searching my face for something familiar. My father hung back near the porch. Steps, his expression flat, unreadable, the cigarette now smoldering uselessly between his fingers. I didn't invite them in. I didn't need to. Instead, I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a folded packet of papers. Clean, crisp, official. I held it out. My brother stepped forward first, hesitated, then took it from my hand. His fingers shook slightly as he unfolded the deed. His eyes scanned the top lines once, twice, before they widened. He looked at me then, really looked, like he was seeing a stranger he couldn't place. My mother moved closer, peering over his shoulder. A soft gasp escaped her, one hand flying to her mouth. She swayed slightly on her feet, as if the foundation beneath her had shifted without warning. My father didn't move, didn't speak, just ground the cigarette into the dirt with the heel of his boot, his gaze heavy and vacant. Nobody said the words out loud. They didn't have to. The deed bore only one name. Mine. No explanations. No apologies demanded or offered. Just the plain, cold fact of it. The house they thought they had, left behind on their terms, was no longer theirs to leave. It hadn't been for hours. I stood there a moment longer, letting the truth settle over them like a slow, inevitable tide. Letting them feel the weight of every choice they had made, every door they had closed. No shouting, no vindication. Only the undeniable reality they could neither deny nor erase. Then without a word, I turned away and disappeared deeper into the house. My house. Leaving them standing on the threshold of a life that no longer included them. The door clicked softly behind me, muting the sound of footsteps retreating across the porch. Through the front window, I caught a glimpse of them. My father lighting another cigarette with shaking hands, my brother stuffing the deed into his jacket as if hiding it could change what it said. My mother glancing back one last time before slipping into the crowd. They left the way they had lived, pretending control over what had already been lost. I didn't watch them drive away. I didn't need to. Instead, I moved through the rooms slowly, tracing the old outlines of a life I no longer missed. The dented banister where my brother used to slide down after school. The kitchen doorway where my height had been marked. Each line getting closer together before stopping altogether. The house was quiet now. Not empty, never empty, but stripped of the noise that once blurred love and loyalty into something twisted and conditional. I found a loose chair in the living room, dusted it off, and sat. The late afternoon sun pushed long beams of light across the hardwood floor, catching the dust motes in slow, lazy spirals. Outside, the last of the guests were leaving, murmuring goodbyes, glancing once at the house, and then looking quickly away. I sat there a long time, letting the silence settle, letting the moment breathe. Not once did I feel the urge to call out after them. Not once did I imagine them turning back. Some endings didn't need words. Some victories didn't need witnesses. They had handed me an ending years ago, folded neatly into a rain-soaked envelope. Now, I had written my own. And this house, flawed, scarred, stubborn, stood like a testament to something they had never understood, that you don't erase people by cutting them out. You only make room for them to become something stronger, something undeniable. When I finally stood, the sun had dropped low, flooding the house with a rich, golden quiet. I opened the back door to let the last of the light in, breathing deep the cold, clean air. No bitterness, no triumphal shout. Only the sure, solid knowledge that I was still here, and they were not.